I'm going to introduce you to Florian Bay, DTN. Florian's natural curiosity took him from chemistry to the world of public speaking and data-driven leadership. We've already heard it this weekend. Spreadsheet numbers, we love them, and I'm one of them too. His chemistry background taught him that everything can be transformed into valuable products under the right conditions. His energy industry career took him from nuclear power station control rooms to strategic analysis for the UK's largest energy company. Florian's passion for public speaking and leadership ignited in 2013 when he joined Toastmasters International. This journey culminated in him leading District 91 in the year 2019 to 2020. And despite the challenges brought by the pandemic, he led District 91, achieving the prestigious recognition of Distinguished District and ranking the district to number 2 in the world. As a distinguished Toastmaster and holder of a speaking diploma from New Era Academy, he brings a wealth of experience and expertise to help us unlock our full potential to a limitless you. Please join me in welcome Florian with the pillars of leadership, exploring essential questions about leadership, such as why do some leaders have a greater impact? Welcome, Florian.
Thank you very much. Really wonderful welcome and very good afternoon, everyone, here in Bristol, Avon, Somersetshire, City of Bristol, and in the virtual world on Zoom. Just to do a quick sense check, can everybody online hear me loud and clear? Yes, I can see thumbs up from the screen. Excellent, excellent. Over the course of this workshop, we're going to have a bit of a discussion about leadership. This is going to be quite interactive, potentially even slightly controversial at times, but that's okay because leadership is a topic that is very arcane, very complex, and there are so many different ways to approach leadership, or as I like to say, as a cat, despite being a cat lover, there are more than one ways to skin a cat. If we get the slide, the clicker to work, please.
You have to stroke it like that.
Working earlier. That's it. It might be the case, but the laser pointer still works. So.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Just press the escape and we start the slideshow.
Just try to slide on the clipboard.
Okay, that's fine. While they fix the technology, we're going to get started with no, we're not going to do the next slide, please. They see the artwork. I think as a premier public speaking organization, I do not want to hear any next slide, please, in this conference. This is our excellence, after all, not about. Thank you. All right, so here's the kind of question I want to ask, and this is where Lucas is going to come in and be my lovely helper. What is an effective leader? If you want to contribute something, just raise your hand and shout out. This also applies for the online audience as well. Just use the hand raise function on Zoom. Yes, please, Smita. Someone who empowers and delegates. Yeah, we can write this down. George. Someone who listens. Yeah. Russell.
Someone who inspires.
Someone who inspires. Chris, you are next.
Someone who shares a
Someone who shares a vision. Yes. John. Leadership by example. Yeah. Lady at the back. Yeah. Okay, isn't afraid to make difficult decision. Yes, please, Abigail. Helps to create new leaders, kind of a transformation. Yes, Mike. Define goals for people in the team. Yes. Are there any contribution online? I don't see any hand raised, so assume not. Yes, Peter again.
Measure the vision.
Okay, knows how to measure the vision and the results, seeing the kind of gap. Yes, please. Okay. Yes, there's a hand raised, I think, from Robert. Yeah.
Oh, for me, right. Someone who listens to his team.
Someone who listens to this team. We've had this before. We can have it again. Any more contributions from the floor? Yes.
Winner.
Someone who's a winner. Yeah, that's fine. We can. Any contributions? Simone. Someone who's prepared to fail. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Abigail. Leading from the art. Yeah. There's a hand up online. Please unmute yourself.
Empathy.
Empathy, and there's another hand raised as well, I see. Can't hear you.
Being diverse and inclusive.
Being diverse and inclusive. Yes, Simon. Shows humility. George again. Learns from failure. Julie. Empower others. Gule. Leads from the back. Okay. So we've had
Someone who makes a difference.
Makes a difference. We've had a lot of contribution here already, which Luke is frantically writing. And it's interesting because some of the contribution that we've had, they've been slightly contradictory within themselves. For example, we had someone earlier that says someone should lead from the front. Then there's someone that said that should lead from the back. Someone said a winner. Someone also mentioned failure, learning from failure. So as we can see, leadership as a discipline is something that is extremely multifaceted. In this morning's workshop, Nadia said inclusive leadership is art. A message I kind of also want to pass on in this workshop is leadership itself can be very art, because can we be all of these things at the same time as individuals, as human beings? Maybe yes, or maybe not. Because it can be very hard to juggle all of these things successfully. If you try juggling with 2 or 3 balls, that's going to be okay. But if you've got a dozen, eventually you're going to crush some eggs. Thank you, Luca. What we're going to do now is we're going to continue the discussion by looking at some examples of historical leadership figures that I picked, that for me are somewhat impactful leaders. Whether you agree or disagree with them, that's a different matter, but I don't mind having a bit of controversy in this workshop. So let's look at our first leader, Mr. John F. Kennedy, American president between 1960 and 1963, before he was assassinated in Dallas in circumstances that no one still really knows about. As a leader, how did John F. Kennedy really stand out in anybody's opinion?
communicator.
Yeah, he was a communicator. In what sense?
He spoke a language that people followed, but wasn't simple.
Mm-hmm. He spoke a language that people could follow. A great communicator. That picture is actually taken in a speech in Rice University about the Apollo program, the Apollo moon landing. I saw a hands up at the back from John. Yeah.
Set some clear challenges.
Yeah. He set a really clear challenges. We're going to put a man on the moon and bring him home safely by the end of this decade. And quite fascinatingly, John F. Kennedy set this target, he set this ambitious goal of putting a man on the moon, returning that man safely that goal was met posthumously. So this is actually quite fascinating because this vision, this machine that he kind of managed to put in motion in the early 1960s, kind of got a momentum on its own, which meant that the vision got fulfilled many, many years after it passed away. Let's kind of reflect on this for a moment because it kind of can really show the impact of potentially having a clear vision, a clear goal, something so crisp, so tangible that it really inspires people that then take it on and deliver on it afterwards. The next leader we're going to look at is a little bit more controversial. It's somebody that lives in the current day and age. How about this gentleman, Mr. Elon Musk? How does Elon Musk stand out as a leader? If you don't like him, that's fine. You can say why. Yes, George? He doesn't know how to run Twitter. Yeah, quite on a whim. Yeah, can see a lot of Andres. Yes, please.
He's ruthless.
Yeah, he's ruthless, taking credit for other people's work. Yes, Simone. Can come across as arrogant. Arno.
Unafraid to change the world.
Unafraid to change the world. Carol.
Hesitate.
Doesn't hesitate to go for what he believes in. Yes, hands at the back. John.
Not happy to fail.
He's quite happy to fail, and he has indeed failed quite a few times in his work. Right? Yes, sir. He's a little bit callous, really. This kind of almost Hank-Reardon type of character that sits in the ivory tower and gets stuff done. Simon.
Yeah.
He doesn't really care what anybody else thinks, and he just plows ahead. Yes, please.
He's constantly looking for opportunities.
Yeah, constantly looking for opportunities, extremely determined and driven. Now, Elon Musk as an individual is someone that has many areas for development, I would say, to put it nicely. As a communicator, as a leader, but we got to give credit to the guy that when, for example, he went to Moscow to say to the Russian Space Agency, I'd like to buy some of your rockets, please. And the Russians thought he was crazy, and some senior Russian engineer apparently spat in his face. On the plane back to the US, made some calculation. It says, we don't need the Russians, we can do our own rockets. And the Falcon series of rockets, the whole SpaceX rockets, reusable rocket engine and so on, building on concept that date back from the 1960s, we got to give credit to the guy. He has been very successful at driving down the cost of space flight, which could potentially unlock a lot of potential for humanity. Now, with X, with other ventures, or potentially building an AI out of X, potentially he's going into some weird direction, but he has this ruthless determination to say, we're going to do this, whatever the cost, whatever it takes. And I know some people might say, well, it can rub people off the wrong way, but things do get done. And that, for me, does kind of deserve a little bit of credit, a bit of respect in an extent, because leadership is such a multifaceted thing that what I would say is no leader is really perfect, which is why I kind of really want to have a bit of a discussion in this workshop. Now we'll look at the next person. How about her, Greta Thunberg? How is she standing out as a leader?
Passionate.
Yeah, she's extremely passionate. She created a movement when she was still in her teenage years. So quite inspirational. Got some motion. Got things done. Anything else? Very driven again. This strength of character and arguing back with people on Twitter and so on. Yes, Smita.
The Russian status quo. She questioned best people who claimed credit to the name and created industries that actually.
Yeah, not afraid to challenge the status quo and actually potentially holding some very powerful people to account. So kind of like the previous character we explored, really like, okay, I'm not happy with the way things are. Why not? Why not? To use the topic of last night table topic debate. Any more contribution? Yes, please. Yeah, Jackie and then yourself, sir.
Okay, just picking up on some of the comments online. She's very much for the cause. She's persistent, and I think she's very appealing, and she caught the mood of the moment. Timing.
Yeah, caught the mood of the moment, created a lot of momentum around her. Excellent. Yes, sir.
Her only influence is through inspiring people. She has no other power.
That's a good, this is a very interesting one to say. Yeah, her influence is to inspire people to create a movement, but she's not necessarily someone that provides solutions, so to say, or kind of gets things done. So she's not an Elon Musk who says, I want rockets and builds them or set a goal. She's more someone that kind of gets the ball rolling in its own way. But that still, in many respects, is leadership. Interestingly, we discussed a lot of things earlier on. Some of these, we touched upon them again in the discussion we've just had about this current and past leadership figure. We could think of other leadership figure, Martin Luther King, the same time a great communicator. We could look at leaders from the United Kingdom as well that perhaps were a little bit ruthless in their own time, like Margaret Thatcher, for example, who strive to change the status quo for better or for worse. Now, we've talked a lot about some adjectives, some characteristics of leaders there, and there's a lot of stuff there. But what if we could break leadership down into only 3 broad categories? Because we got to kind of try and simplify it there, try and really go to what I would say, the essence of leadership truly is. And we're going to breaking down these categories as, first of all, vision. It's already been mentioned already, putting forward a goal, challenging the status quo, saying why not. That's kind of putting a vision forward in some respect. Also inspiring others, rallying others. Again, the power of a vision. But also direction, which we could also look at potentially as execution. This is really more about getting things done. Because there are some leaders who come to the table, they don't necessarily always come to the table with a very strong vision. Or maybe they just borrow ideas from other people. That's actually kind of the case with Elon Musk. He's recycling ideas that in some cases date back 50, 60 years and just making them happen to life. But there's that direction, there's this unstoppable momentum of actually delivering on the promise. And last, but certainly not least, communication, which has been mentioned in many different ways, listening to others, delegation and so on. Communication is extremely multifaceted, and we're going to explore it down a bit more. Now let's start off with vision. If you could define vision in one sentence, what would this one sentence be? A foresight to see things happening. Yeah, I like it. Yes, sir. A picture of the future. We're starting to have a theme here. Foresight, future. Chris?
Understanding the goal.
Understanding the goal. Direction's going to come in later. Julie? Ability to problem solve. Yeah, that can come in. Simone? Being creative. Rose? Making a difference. Jackie online?
The ability to understand the environment in which they're working and the ability to see the opportunities there.
Okay, seeing opportunity, understanding the environment. There's another hand up online. Yes. Deepak?
On a mission to make a change.
Mission to make a change, yes. So change, again, shining the status quo. Alistair? Ability to see the bigger picture. Okay. And last, Guli? Create the dream, right. Now, the definition of vision I'm going to give is not my definition. It's actually a definition from the Oxford English Dictionary. And that definition is the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. It touches upon almost everything that we've all said. We've got the future, we've got the planning, we've got the imagination, so the more dreamy side of things, like stepping away from reality, stepping away from what's possible, but also wisdom. What is possible? What is not so possible? Perhaps. The wisdom to know, is this vision achievable potentially? Or if it's not achievable now, when could it potentially be achievable? So that's really kind of a really broad definition, but at the same time, extremely, extremely, extremely specific, which is really amazing. Now, the way you would boil down a vision as a leader is why we are doing this. Now, in Toastmasters, we may have opportunities to be a leader at our own club level, as club president, as membership. And I'm going to kind of throw this back to the room now. Are there any people here that are club presidents this year? You put your hand up if you're a club president. Okay. Okay, I see a club president. Rob, so you're a club president. What is your vision for your club? Why? 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 I got that. That's what I just used there on is something called the 5 why techniques, which is a very powerful brainstorming technique to get really deep down into something. And I like this example that he gave, because sometime in Toastmasters, at district leadership, for example, even at club leadership, people say, well, why do we want to keep growing our clubs? We're 30, surely that's enough. Why do we want to keep growing? And instead, can't we focus on the members that we already have? And this is really where talking about continuous opportunities, having an environment to strive, all of these things can really come in. And at the same time, you want to grow, but how much? You can't obviously grow to infinite size. So this is where more the kind of wisdom parts or anything can come in. Is anybody else that's been an area or division director or is elected to be an area or division director? There are a few in this room actually. Russell, so what was your vision as division D director this year?
I had 2 visions.
Yeah, that's fine.
First vision was to put in place all the good things that my role model as division director did.
Thank you. That's very flattering. What else?
Second one was to have a group of clubs across lots of different areas that are thriving. Happy Toastmasters.
Yeah. So happiness, being togetherness here. It's a simple vision in many respects, but sometimes bringing people back together, healing the wounds in society can be a very powerful force for change. There are many leaders who made their fame, became famous because they noticed that something was wrong in society and they wanted to change that. It could be racial discrimination. It could be the fact that some people may have more money than others and there was a lot of inequality in society. So that in its way can be a very, very positive force for change and change for good. But now we're gonna start to go a little bit more into the detail and how can we put a vision together really? So a couple of things points that we're gonna kind of start to explore what now. The first thing is there are 2 very powerful approaches for putting together a vision. There is the top-down approach or there is the bottom-up approach. Can someone describe me what I mean by top-down or bottom-up? Yes, sir.
Top down, the leaders leading it and coming from the kind of highest authority and people following that.
Yeah, that's
up would be led by perhaps more people, but more people at a lower level of power.
Okay, yeah, that's a good definition. And our question for the room of these 2 approaches, which one is the most effective? Bottom up. Why? Why do you believe it's more effective?
Inclusive.
Because it's more inclusive, yeah, but yeah. There might be more ownership, yes. More buy-in. Potentially more resource, Luca.
People will accept ideas that they help come up with themselves.
Yeah, they will accept ideas they can come up with themselves. Now, let's say one of us becomes Prime Minister of the United Kingdom tomorrow, and you're going to come up with a plan to make the United Kingdom great again, or united. Could you come up with a bottom-up approach to do this?
Not entirely.
Not entirely. These approaches, they're both effective in their own ways, but the bottom-up approaches can be far more difficult to implement at scale. On a very large scale, there are still ways to use this approach to make people heard, to make people feel listened, and so on. But I've seen this in the company I work for, which is what we call a scale-up. So it's no longer a startup, but now it's starting to be more of a corporate. And one issue that's emerging in the company right now, surprise, surprise, is people at the lower levels don't necessarily feel as heard as they perhaps were in the past when the company was much smaller. So the bottom-up approach, great, but does it scale really well? And the other thing I want to say is consistency, because if we come up with a statement or a vision that challenges the status quo, and suddenly we have a lot of people that get their inputs onto it, the consistency, the transformational aspect might be lost. And this is why sometime in leadership, this ruthlessness of saying, we're going to do it this way because it's going to be for the greater good of everyone, and here's why, which is where the communication piece really comes in, can be very necessary in some circumstances. I know it might come across as uncomfortable for some of you. You might think, yeah, but society has changed. But still, this kind of very direct top-down approach, it can still be done very effectively nowadays. But this is where the communication piece, I would say, really come in as well. Now, another way to do that is answering a problem. We mentioned it's challenging the status quo, but if, for example, you're in business, a great visionary is James Dyson. He said, well, I don't want a vacuum cleaner where there's a bag because it's messy to clean up the bag and so on. I actually wish I had a bag vacuum cleaner because throwing the bag would be easier than cleaning a bag as vacuum, but that's my own opinion here. He found the problem and he came up with a solution and eventually made a business that made $1 million. If we look at McDonald's, for example, the problem here that there isn't a way to serve food cheaply and consistently across the country. The current service offering doesn't work. I'm going to come up with let's come up with something different. Ryanair, EasyJet, the established player were hogging the markets, and this is where visionaries like Freddie Laker, like some of the older generation might remember, they came and say we can do this more cheaply, and this is how something eventually started to snowball. Another point here is meeting that perceived needs. Could be consistent product, could be all of these things. But what I would really want to say is, if you want to build up a fantastic vision, it needs to be what I call a snowballing idea. What do I mean by this? What's a snowballing idea? Give me an example. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it draws everybody in because it gathers its own pace. Any example of a snowballing idea someone can think of? Yes, John.
Tesla's probably a good snowballing idea.
That might be that. Electric cars, Gule. Wordle. What's Wordle? Yeah, that's one. Any others? The internet became a snowballing thing because people saw the opportunities and took it in their own source. How about some more controversial ones, perhaps?
Bitcoin.
Bitcoins, yeah. Yeah, Bitcoin. Some any more? ChatGPT, yeah. AI. Yeah, there's some contributions online. I saw your hands up. Jackie, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was going to say social media.
Social media.
The other one is potentially what Dyson did with the vacuum cleaner. Now everyone does cool new vacuum cleaners, whereas before it was just completely stagnant.
Yeah, everybody does it now. That's a snowboarding ID. Smita?
Ralph Smedley 100 years ago.
Yeah, Ralph Smedley 100 years ago. George? Yeah. Now I'm going to give two very controversial examples of snowboarding IDs. Take back control. And the last controversial one is from each according to its ability to each according to its need. Who said that one? Karl Marx. And that snowballed into communism and a lot of ism and so on, some of whom changed the world for the better, but some of whom resulted in killing fields in Cambodia and in the Kolyma region in Far East Russia. So this is really the power of a vision where people are like, I can take some of that, I can take some of that. It can be a very powerful force, but it can also become an uncontrollable force as well. Okay, so now let's move on to direction. And again, same principle. I went into the Oxford English Dictionary and found a definition of direction. How do you define direction? A to B, yeah, that's the basic one, but I like it. Any other IDs? So roadmap, yeah, so we're starting to see a concept of motion. Any more IDs? Somebody's looking on their, people are looking on their phone, I see. Oh. Sorry? A vector on the plane, yeah, we got this thing.
Being told what to do.
Being told what to do, yeah. So according to the Oxford Dictionaries, the course which must be taken in order to reach a destination. Now, that course, it's effectively a roadmap. So your direction is your roadmap, and it is a roadmap that helps you get there. So it's both the action of having the roadmap in the first place, but also the fact that you know where to go and you can start to make your step towards your destination. And here your destination is pretty much your vision. This is where we want to go. Now, has anybody here been into hiking or long distance walking? Okay, I can see quite a few people. Has any hikers here been in a situation where what was on the map or what was on the app looked quite different on the ground? Oh yes, I can see a lot of people nodding their ups. I've been there myself, like, oh yeah, I'm not sure what's that turn looking like, the map's not quite clear and so on. So this is where we have to make a lot of decisions to correct course, to check where we're going and so on, unless we fall into a ditch. Sometimes there's a road that should be there but isn't there. So really stuff can happen. And for me, the direction is what can you do, what can we do to fulfill and reach our vision. And this is kind of a step which is, we could say, a lot more hands-on, a lot more operational, about getting things done, about putting one foot in front of the other and reaching to the destination. But that step is no less important, because we can be a great visionary as a leader or even a great communicator, but vision and communication without execution doesn't really get us anywhere, really, because there's all these small challenges that we have to overcome and so on. Leadership is not easy. We're president in a Toastmaster club. We want to get more members, and then someone from the committee say, actually, I'm not going to be renewing my membership. We've all been in that situation, haven't we? There's someone in the committee that said, you rely on, and they don't rely on their membership. This is where all the kind of hurdles and all the small things happen. And how do we deal with it? How do we stay the course? and so on. This is where all of this really, really comes in. Very multifaceted, resilience can come in, our ability to get stuff done really comes in. There's a lot of stuff that can come in here. But what are some of these elements? There's a picture of a chessboard at the start in the background. I'm a big fan of strategic planning and looking long-range strategic plan. Wrote a lot of these when I was on the district trio. Strategic planning, thinking things through can be a very powerful thing to do. But as the saying says, quite often things don't go according to plan at all. There could be a pandemic, there could be an unspoken event. When I was getting the coach to get to Bristol yesterday, there were some roadworks on the M4. We got delayed a little bit. Then there were a lot of police people in Bristol Centre because apparently there was a fire in the hospital yesterday. Didn't delay me much, but these are the kind of things that we can't always plan for. Now, my kind of broad guidelines here for all of you that want to become better at providing direction as a leader is the first one is, where are you now is where you want to be. You're looking at the map, you know that you've started the hike, you know what the end point is, but where are you in relation? Are you halfway through? Are you a third of the way through? Do you still have a lot to go? Or maybe you've done a lot already, but the hardest part, the big climb is still yet to go and you're exhausted, you're knackered, but you're still going to have a 300-meter climb to get to the top of Box Hill, for example. Anybody here hiked at Box Hill, by the way? Wow, a lot of people. It is a great hike, but you reach the top. Oh yeah, I know. I can see Arnold nodding, but it is a great one. Seven Sisters is great. It's up and down, up and down. I prefer the Seven Sisters actually, but I got badly sunburned the last time I did. Now, problems do occur, so this is where we as leaders, we start to kind of break them down into their components and see which components we could influence. We look, for example, at organizing this conference. There's a big team in the background that's helping with the tech, helping with many things. This is because there are many moving parts. Things can go wrong. There was someone shuffling around to put the screen back on just a moment ago. So these are the kind of things that sometimes we as leaders, we got to think about and think for. What's the worst that can happen? How can we plan for it? When I worked in the nuclear industry, I got taught this, like, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, you're building a new power station in Hinkley Point C on the coast of Somerset. What's the worst that can happen? Sorry? Oh, no, not even that. There could be a tsunami. So, okay, if there's a 1 in a 10,000 year tsunami, how big are the waves going to be? Oh, 10 meters. That means you need to build your station on 10 meters of rock so that it's safe and not have your diesel generators on the ground as well, like in Fukushima. But that kind of questioning attitude is really what can come in very handy in that stage where we just kind of go into the nitty-gritty detail where the curious kid was there looking at the things and we look at solving the problem. Another point is resources. In Toastmasters, we sometimes try to do things on the cheap, I would say. We don't always have a lot of resources because we're an organization which kind of wants to be accessible. So my challenge back to the room there in terms of resources is, why do we have to always do things on the cheap? Don't do anything just yet. You can come back to me at the gala dinner this evening. But sometimes, like, why not? Okay, you want to do a great event, a great conference in London. It's going to be expensive, but you need to get more resources. What can you do to get more of these resources? You've got this vision, but you know that there's going to be a gap between resources you've got, the resources you need. What can you do to bring that gap? You get sponsors. In the context of a business leaders, it means you would go to venture capitalists, and they would be investing in your business. Or if you're a country that suddenly comes up with a vision, then you can just run the printing press or borrow a lot of money to just get the stuff done regardless. As was the case with the Apollo program, where, as Kennedy said, it's going to cost less than what we're spending on cigarettes and cigars every year. So that kind of a nice turn of the sentence there. And the last point is always being observant and asking questions in the stage. We're on that hike, you're on this thing. If you want to make sure you're on the course, you've got to ask this question and really stay the course. Timekeepers, how are we doing for time, by the way? Could we please show the light? The lights. Thank you. All right. And I want to prove this resource point by asking a question about this guy. Does anybody know who that guy is? Nope.
Father.
Nope. It's not Douglas Bader. This guy is fascinating. He's called Roger Bushell. Does anybody know who Roger Bushell was? Big X, the Great Escape. So that guy came up with a plan in a prisoner of war camp in Germany to say, we're going to build 3 tunnels, we're going to dig under the Germans' nose, and we're going to reach freedom. Everybody's going to have good rations, they're going to have passport, they're going to have fake papers, fake civilian clothing, they're going to wreak havoc on Germany, and we're all going to get back home and meet in Piccadilly for a big piss-up. Only 3 people did it successfully. But 6 million Germans were running after all the escaped POW camp in 1943 in Germany when that happened. They did that in a prisoner of war camp. They were starving, they had to rely on Red Cross parcel for resources, but the kind of degree of creativity that these guys showed, making pumps and machinery out of milk tins and so on, is fascinating. If you watch the movie, but there's a book called The Great Escape that goes into a lot more detail. It's easy to read, it's only about 200 pages. Read it because it's really, really fascinating. And I'm going to touch upon the communication side of things, which is really, how can you help? How can I help you? Because leaders, we can't do anything by ourselves. We would really need a team to get the vision to snowball, to highlight the benefits and do all of this thing. And that's where the communication piece really, really shines and really comes in. Communication, however, can take many forms. Which form can communication take? That's from before, Russell.
Verbal and non-verbal.
There's verbal and non-verbal. At the very start. Yes, sir. Collective discussion. What else? Yes, George.
Third approach.
Could be a top-down approach. Communicate from the top. You're going to do this. These are the written orders. Yeah. That's a form of communication. Any more?
Brainstorming.
Brainstorming. I'd like to hear from people who haven't contributed yet. I might pick on audience people individually. Yes, Deepak and then Jackie.
Storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling, telling stories of how the vision's being fulfilled, all of that. Yeah, great. Jackie?
Direct and indirect.
It can be direct and indirect in other ways. Any more ideas? Yes.
Frequently.
How frequently you communicate. That frequency might vary depending on circumstances. There's no right or wrong answers. We are in a society which is now surrounded by communication. Social media, form of communication. Internet, form of communication. Newspapers, a form of communication. Back in the very origins of newspapers, they tended to be things to kind of spread the news, or they were government-owned entities that would pass down the government messages and so on and so on. So yes, that communication can take many different forms. Now, I'm not going to try and make all of us better communicator in the space of a few minutes. I'm only going to give you a few questions to ask. First of all, is to go back to this vision. We as humans, we are naturally wired to listen to stories, be they are even written stories or novels or books, but we want to connect with the why, we want to connect with the purpose. Like, okay, you want to climb a mountain, you're not going to want to know about all the details of the steps to Snowdown and so on, but how will you feel when you reach the top of Snowdown or anything? That might potentially, the sense of achievement and so on, that's kind of going to connect with all of us a lot more. also leaders leaders should be listening, but they also need to talk and challenge. Now, that might seem counterintuitive to what we discussed earlier, that, oh, as leaders, we should be listening. But now, let's play a game. Let's all listen to each other in this room right now. This is the sound of silence. If we only ever listen to each other and we don't talk, we don't necessarily challenge, what we can end up with is the sound of silence. And communication is a little bit of both. So yes, leaders, they should be listening, they need to take the pulse. But sometimes taking that pulse is actually asking the question, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? How are you feeling today? Otherwise, and this is where more active listening can come in, but we are the one initiating and breaking the silence, because things don't happen in a vacuum. You can do chemistry. You can sometimes do chemistry in a vacuum environment when you have, if you want to do something that's air sensitive, like at university. But if you have nothing and just only vacuum, nothing happens at all. And another one here is to keep things simple, visual, and to the point. Why is TikTok so addictive? Because it is simple, visual, and to the point. I do not have TikTok on my phone. I refuse to engage with TikTok. But this is kind of the whole point is. And again, we touched upon this, communication is just very multifaceted. Now, I kind of lied earlier. I said there were 3 parts of leadership, but there are actually 4. And a good analogy for that is, I'm going to use something very nerdy from tech. How many satellites do you need to have a viable global positioning system? Oh, I've had 3 and I've had 4. Someone says 3, yeah? 12, yeah? Technically, the answer is the more the merrier, because the more accurate your positioning is going to be. With 3 satellites, you end up with 2 satellites interact, you end up with a circle. You add a third one, you end up with 2 points. Typically, one of these is on Earth, one of these is in space. So you can get away with only having 3 satellites. But with 4, you know for sure that you only have 1 point. You know where you are, you know that if you move, you're still going to be where you are, and it's 5 points. So what's this final missing piece then for leaders? We've got the communication, we've got the direction, we've got the vision, but what's the final piece, you might think? Good team, telling, maybe, action, yeah, action fits into direction, that's fine. The team, yeah, that fits in communication and everything else. Yeah. Yeah, you yourself. You're the pillar to all of this rest. That's the foundation stone of leadership. And that foundation stone is ourselves. And I'm kind of going to leave the closing words here to this gentleman here, Chinese general called Sun Tzu, which wrote about leadership 5,000 years ago. If you haven't read his book, The Art of War, read it. It's a fascinating book. And he said this: if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will always be defeated. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, you will win only 50% of the time. But if you know yourself and you know the enemy, you will be invincible, because you know where to strike them, you know where to protect yourself when they strike you, so you always win the battle, you always win the duel. And that foundation stone here is all self-awareness. Now, how much time do we have left for questions this morning? But 4 minutes for question. I thought the red light was supposed to show at 50 minutes. But do I have an hour or 50 minutes? Okay. There's been a change of timing then. Right. So we're going to have a bit of a Q&A session. anything we've covered in this workshop, anything you may want to disagree with or challenge me about, feel free to ask away. I know we've covered a lot. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Any questions, comments, suggestions? Maybe you disagree completely with something I said. Yes, Abigail.
Yeah. What advice would you give, or what has been helpful for you in developing your leadership?
I think what has been helpful for me is to realize where my own strengths and weaknesses laid. And it took me a while, actually, because when you develop to become a leader, you're always gonna meet a lot of people that say you should do more of this, you should do more of that, you should know that. And I'd say be very careful with this, because it's sometimes a code for, oh, you should become more like me, basically. Everyone has their own unique leadership style. I would say, looking back on my journey as district director, using strategic plan, numbers a lot, maybe quite a bit of top-down communication as well, that was my own style, because I kind of realized, well, that's something I enjoy doing. That's something that's a strength. I should leverage it against perhaps the things I'm not so good at. While other people that were better at things I wasn't so good at, they could take over, they could take on from me. So it's really this self-awareness piece I was mentioning last, that, because let's face it, even by mastering only one of these dimensions, you can potentially be a leader. Like, let's say you become a master communicator. I can think of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is a master communicator, and he became a leader. Did he always say the right thing? Not always. Because he kind of lacked that self-awareness, perhaps. But you got to give credit to the guy. He achieved his goal of becoming prime minister of the country. He didn't do a good job of it, but he got there in the end, because he kind of leveraged this communication piece that it was really, really good at. Now, we could go into a lot more detail into the 3 styles. And what I'd say is, if someone of you say, oh, I want to be great at communication, at direction, at vision, my takeaway message is good luck, because it's not easy. I would say for me, I would be quite strong with direction and somewhat with vision, but maybe not necessarily always with the communication. That does mean I can get things done, but I might ruffle some feathers. Along the way. As long as you have the self-awareness to recognize that, that's okay. Any more questions? Deepak, yeah.
As a leader, we are always placed into conflicting ideas or conflicting situations. Like, sometimes we have to go hard on the teams. Sometimes we have to be considerate and gentle. And we discussed certain ideas going leading from front or going from back. So how do we maintain a balance, or like what's the best way to deal in such scenarios?
It would depend on the situation in question. That's what I'm going to say. There are situations where a lot of very forceful, strong leadership from the front may be needed, especially when the going gets tough and you've got to show to people that, hey, we're kind of going to go through this together. So as the leader, you'll be the first one to jump into the cold water, take the puddle and so on. But there are other situations where people cannot get on well themselves. You know they're doing a good job. You just need to empower them and let them get on with things. I mean, one thing I learned this from my manager at work, Dawn, because I told her when I joined the team that I want to do your job eventually. And to her immense credit, she said, "I'm cool with this. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to find opportunities." Now I get to chair the team. I get to chair the team meetings. Just stays off camera, stays off mute, leaves me deal with it. She empowers me. So that really depends on the situation. But equally, when the going gets tough, she would not hesitate to stomp her feet on the wall and say, right, team, our metrics are not good. We got to improve. And that's this kind of juggling act of leadership. That's not easy, because it's like you've got to be a bit of everything at the same time. That's not easy for anyone. We're only humans. We're not a computer. I see there's another hand up online.
Thank you. It's Pooja speaking. I had a question related to the 4th principle of leadership that you said about self-awareness. So what happens if we've been led to believe, maybe because of having a disability or some other reason, that we can't be leader? We've been told that you have to be a certain personality, like commanding or whatever, in order to be a leader. How should we unlearn that? Thank you.
So that's a really great question. My answer here would be anybody can be a leader if you leverage the strengths that you're very good at. Like for example, people might say, "Oh, to be a leader, you got to be a great communicator," and so on. You can actually have people that potentially help you with that communication piece and focus on the things you're good at, formulating a vision, solving problems, all of these things. Obviously, potentially having some disability, some challenges that might limit a person in some ways, but in the context of leadership, well, let's think of one leader that was transformational and we forget these days, Mr. Franklin D. Roosevelt. This guy was a full-term US president and he was in a wheelchair. He was a wheelchair because he got struck by poliomyelitis. And whenever he was doing speeches to the nation in World War II, he was in a wheelchair. And that guy really arguably helped the Allied war beyond the world. So obviously more effort might be needed, but limitation that we sometimes place on ourselves, they're quite artificial. I'm seeing a lot of red flashing lights. Yeah, you can try and kick me off the stage if you want. Thank you very much.
Great impact, Florian Bay. Thank you so much, Florian.